Bishop Nathanyel is a popular Hebrew Israelite leader, and he was in Kenya recently showing the people from the Bible how the Israelites are black. Let's go to this passage where he exposes to us clearly why we should never trust people like this when it comes to teaching the Bible, because they clearly do not understand.
Chapter 1. All this is in your Holy Bibles. All the new Bibles, they're taking the color out. Good News Bibles, all the new ones, they're taking color out.
Song of Solomon. Chapter 1 and verse 1. The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's.
So Solomon wrote this song. Watch how he describes himself in this song. Verse 5.
Verse 5. I am black, but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem.
King Solomon described himself as black and comely. Comely is good looking. So he's the king of the 12 tribes of Israel. He describes himself as a black man. But no church on earth teaches that. They consider it a heresy. But then where's the scriptures where he's white? Where's the scriptures where Jesus is white? Where's the scripture that Job is white? But all throughout Kenya, white, 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 white. All throughout Kenya. Not just Kenya, Uganda, Ghana, America. It's the same thing.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
And now, before we even get into just his terrible blunder here, right? The one point he has is that, yes, at some point in time, there were professing Christians who went around and whitewashed Christianity. But even if you study this and look into history, you would know that in all different places where Christianity reached, they initially would present Jesus as their own people. So you'd go to different places in the world, you go to Japan or China, and they would draw Jesus. He would be depicted as a Chinese, as a Japanese. You'd go to different places in Africa, they would present him as their own. That's what people typically would do. That isn't necessarily right in and of itself, just for the record, right? But that was the typical thing. He is right in saying there are professing Christians who went around and, like I said, whitewashed Christianity. But because a group of people, even if they were the most powerful people at a point, whitewashed Christianity, that doesn't make Christianity false. That doesn't make what they were doing right or anything along those lines. But now let's get to Song of Solomon. So he started, as you heard him, by going to verse 1, right? The first verse where it says the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. And this is fine to do, right? Because no Christian disputes that this is the Song of Solomon. This is Solomon's book. He wrote this, right? But from that moment, it just goes downhill because he makes a grave mistake. And this is why we should never trust these sorts of people when it comes to the Bible. Because example I like to give in regards to Song of Solomon, it's like Romeo and Juliet, right? It's like William Shakespeare writing Romeo and Juliet, right? We would never read through Romeo and Juliet and say everything that is being said in Romeo and Juliet is Romeo speaking. Even if, let's say, for example, William Shakespeare wrote himself into the play and he was being Romeo, for example, as Solomon did in the Song of Solomon. We wouldn't read through all of William Shakespeare's poem and say, yeah, everything that's being said is from the mouth of Shakespeare. He's writing the whole story, but he's obviously like smart enough to know that I'm writing this story. Some of the stuff you're reading is from Romeo. Some of the stuff you're reading is from Juliet. Some of the stuff is from Romeo's family. Some is from Juliet's family. Some is from just onlookers, etc. And it's the same thing in the Song of Solomon. But for some reason, Bishop Nathanyel cannot understand this. That's why you heard him say, and I'll play it again for you now.
Song of Solomon. Chapter 1 and verse 1. The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's.
So Solomon wrote this song. Watch how he describes himself in this song. Verse 5.
You heard him say that Solomon is describing himself in Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 5.
So Solomon wrote this song. Watch how he describes himself in this song. Verse 5.
Let's look at it. So this is why it's such a terrible blunder, because they're so fixated on this word here, black, right? That when this person says in verse 5, I am black, but beautiful, or black and beautiful, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon, immediately, anybody with even just a simple level of reading comprehension would know Solomon is not speaking here. Why would he not be speaking here? Because he's not saying he's black and beautiful like his own curtains, speaking in the third person. Not because you can't speak in the third person or people never speak in the third person, but because clearly Solomon is not speaking in the third person here. Look at the next verse. The person continues to speak. Look not upon me because I'm black. She says, because the sun has looked upon me. So this is more likely, as she's describing here, because she's been out in the sun and her skin, she's sunburnt basically. But notice how the verse continues. My mother's children were angry with me. Is Solomon here saying that the rest, his brothers, were angry with him, that so much so that they made him the keeper of the vineyards? Were his brothers making him go out into the fields and tend to the grass, etc.? So their fields, their vineyards, so he couldn't obviously take care of his own vineyard. Obviously not. Just like in Romeo and Juliet, you have Romeo speaking and you have Juliet speaking. This here in verse 5 and verse 6 is not King Solomon speaking in his own song. This is the woman who he's in love with, which is speaking. And we know this because the same person is speaking for the majority of these verses up until this point. Let's just go back, right? If this is Solomon speaking, this is why it would be branded as a heresy, and why no Christian will teach this, is because based on Bishop Nathanyel's interpretation here, you turn King Solomon into a sodomite. Look at verse 2. It says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. Solomon isn't here saying that another man should be kissing him with the kisses of his mouth because his love is better than wine. That makes no sense. It's the woman speaking. What she says, she continues in verse 3. Because of the savor of your good ointments, right? Because you smell nice, your name is as ointment which is poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love you. Solomon isn't saying here that, look, my fragrance smells so nice, and because of this, all the virgins love me. No, the woman is saying this. What does she say next in verse 4? Draw me, we will run after you. The king has brought me into his chambers. Solomon isn't saying that. He's not saying that some king brought him into his chamber. That would make King Solomon a sodomite, which we obviously know is blasphemy. It's incorrect. It is heretical. He's not saying we will be glad and rejoice in thee. We will remember your love more than wine. The upright love thee. Solomon isn't saying this. This isn't Solomon. It's the same person speaking in verse 2, verse 3, verse 4, and verse 5, and verse 6. It's the woman that Solomon is in love with which is saying this. And as we looked at in verse 6, the reason she's saying she's black is because the sun has looked upon her. Because she's been out in the sun all day, she's got darker and darker and darker. But again, you heard him say,
so Solomon wrote this song. Watch how he describes himself in this song. Verse 5.
This is why you should be very careful listening to people like Bishop Nathanyel when it comes to speaking the Bible. And if you want to know how they trick people into joining cults like this, I spoke about it a little bit in today's video, but watch this video right here. It will show you exactly how they use stuff like this to get people into their cult. God bless.